Do you see what Patrice has done to himself?
Mm-hmm.
And he's just, like, walking around with, like, a constant erection as well.
Yep. Main man's Patrice. Alright, watch out, buns. So, should I be working on taking care of the animals? Or...
I mean, it would be wonderful if you could set Logan up, because I think most of the hay nets he has are probably pretty depleted at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be great if I just didn't have to worry about him for the rest of the day. So if you can give him, like, 2 full hay nets of the red ones, that ought to hold him, since it's, it's above 0 right now, right? Like, he doesn't need a lot, he just needs stuff to eat.
Some lunch.
Yeah, and presumably whenever Patrice stops feeling sorry for himself, he will eat a little bit too. Yes, there's a good stretch. And,
I guess once I'm, when I'm heading up for my appointment, I'll take out Munchie's bottle.
yes, that would be great too, because she's going to need to eat when you come back.
But it's mostly just filling up Logan's hay bags, right? I think
mean,
everyone else is pretty good, right?
I think everyone else is okay. Like, Peter could use some water, because I did not get around to that this morning.
Okay.
I think if there's anyone else. I think everyone else is okay.
So we're back once more for our weekly Metaviews Salon, where we invite our members of the Metaviews network to talk about important subjects. Today we're going to wrap around the concept of defunding big tech and refunding community, which is really inspired from a paper that a colleague or former colleague and current friend Andrew Clement wrote, which looks at this idea of defunding big tech and refunding community. And it recognizes, as I jump through different scenes here, it recognizes that from a policy perspective, the idea of taxing big tech or regulating big tech was previously forbidden, but is now in fashion. And it's not only in fashion, but it's an opportunity to rethink our digital lives, to rethink the internet as we know it from a political perspective, an economic perspective, a cultural perspective. This week, the big headlines are about Australia, who are potentially passing legislation that would force digital media companies to compensate the news industry for when their articles or items appear on their platforms. But it's really just the first salvo in a larger policy negotiation or policy process to not just hold these big tech companies accountable, but talk about what to do with the money. Talk about what to do with the revenue they generate. What should go to the public interest? What should be divvied up to private industry? What areas of society should benefit from that money? So we thought we'd get together to really riff and brainstorm and just essentially jam on the phrase defund big tech, refund community. What does it mean? What could it mean? What should we anticipate? So today we've got our good friend Vasiliki Bednar and our other good friend Gregory Meister, aka Stro1. Both of you, I think, have really relevant and interesting overlap in terms of your professional backgrounds and your personal interests. So why don't we just start with, what does the phrase, defund big tech, refund community mean to you? Like, what does it evoke? And what do you see as the opportunity, both from a policy perspective, but also just from an old school political perspective, in terms of the three of us here on our soapbox, kind of hypothesizing what we think the future of social media should be?
Well, from a policy perspective, I wonder and worry about us presenting taxes as something that are consistently punitive, right? It's like big tech got to some kind of big tipping point that now we're going to penalize them with a tax. And like, tax as a transaction is, first of all, very legitimizing for businesses, and also should be part of the environment that they operate in. So we've struggled with these, we've struggled with digital entities just because the way our tax regimes may be predicated on, a company having physical assets in a particular region in order to, prompt the tax or the compliance. So I don't want to be too wonky. That's already a little bit wonky, but we're presenting this as government, flexing, but really it's government catching up, tying shoes while they're running, and the race started yesterday. So I love the connections to refunding community. I'm looking forward to chatting about that. That's just my quick reaction to this long overdue fumbling of taxing large technology companies. Sorry, Stro, I jumped right.
No.
Stro won.
It's a big topic, because I think it's actually the topic of the century in a way, because our political system and how we got here is hundreds of years of capitalism in a way, right? Where all that wealth and control has gone back up to the top, where it's just a handful of monoliths, I think, as what was written in that article that you shared, have complete control. So really it comes back down to the people. It comes back to bringing it back to democracy in a way, and the communities, like the people that are in the communities, and the diaspora that comes with that, not just the big money controlling everything, including our government, right? Like it's these companies have like the Googles and the Facebooks, they have more control than our governments, and they have more control over people than our governments. So,
well, Ed, sorry, I'll let you finish.
Yeah, and so really it comes back down to who controls the culture, and shouldn't the people be in control of the culture, because it is about the people, not about the capital.
Well, and I think you hit it on the nose, and that's, to be blunt, the Metaview. Is government going to be able to keep doing what government does? Or, as Vass pointed out, because they're so late to the game, do they also risk demonstrating their obsolescence because they might try to regulate these giants and fail in doing so? And I think, Stro, your point about money is my problem with the news industry. Right? Mm-hmm. Like here you have this industry that failed to innovate, that made really bad business choices, and they're now saying effectively bail us out because the other guys won, because the other guys beat us at their game. Now, I think that I'm open to the argument that the other guys, Google, Facebook, didn't play fair, and that they broke competitive laws. That means that there should be some remedy, or there should be some action. But Vass, what I started to think about when you described, the government tying up their shoelaces as they're running, is this notion of policy theater, right? That this is an exercise in policy theater in which the government wants to look like they're doing something. And the big tech companies want to look as if they're being responsible and they're listening to society. But in the end, nothing's changing. Right? In the end, the digital giants maintain their power. Governments are losing their agency, losing their ability to respond. And we as the public aren't really being served by either.
Well, it's also a reminder that we policymakers lack a toolkit for the digital age, right? We're grasping at what do we have? Like, what can we use? It's almost like, you say theater. Think of the policy theater as there's like a tickle trunk. And the tickle trunk is the policy, is the toolkit, right? And we're in the tickle trunk and we're like, I've got this. I think it fits. It's a tax. Let's do it. So I'm being a little facetious, but, taxing, Facebook, that doesn't create the algorithmic accountability we're looking for. That doesn't change mis and disinformation. The relationship with news media, of course, is worthy of interrogation. You know so much more about it than me. But you also know that I recently pointed to a particular pantomime with ticket resale bots. I'm trying not to say scalper bots, but that's how they're, recognized, where there was an inciting incident and we scrambled and we passed legislation and it has a cool acronym and it doesn't even do anything. And we need to be I hope, mindful of reminding ourselves as policy people, we do make efforts to regulate technology. And the question is, are we good at it? And if we're good at it, then great, let's be more ambitious and bigger. Last thing I'll say, since you're letting me ramble, which is very generous, the big tech agenda, being set federally is one part of this, I want to say puzzle, I guess I should say play. But, I really question where the provinces are. So you want to talk about big tech, let's talk about labor and time and algorithmic manipulation that's been happening for so long and has come to characterize low-wage service work. And we have nothing in our labor legislation to protect people from basically being treated like robots. To my mind, that's part of taking on big tech, because it's a response to the future of work and how technology is changing work. And again, it's so disappointing we don't even talk about it. Like we're still talking about future of work as if it's on the horizon. Are the robots coming? Are they taking our jobs? The robots are here and they're manipulating people's jobs, and people are getting injuries. It's just mental health. Maybe we'll come back to that later. Maybe it should be a whole other salon. Ramble over. Bass on mute.
Go ahead,
sorry,
Stro.
go ahead.
No.
Yeah, so it is manifold, right? Like, to me, it's so complex. It is a theater, and it is a puzzle, and it's a puzzle and a theater, and it's in the dimensions, like, because it's from healthcare to work to community, right? And where is that? Like, it's so fragmented, but yet here are these monoliths that have so much control of it. It's how do we connect it all so that it works for everybody, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, and I Vass, your point about the multi-jurisdictional nature ties to Stroh's point about the complexity of it all. Because, I'm increasingly seeing, these types of opinion pieces and analytical pieces that just say everything's too complex. And we're trying to, pigeonhole. We're trying to, like, fit the square peg into the circle hole, rather than acknowledging, maybe the tickle trunk doesn't have the tools we need right now. Because Vass, your point about how it's not just federal governments, it's not just provincial or state-based, it's municipal too. Right? Totally. And all three, we are expecting to have proficiencies and capabilities that they just don't got. And, how do we create that on-ramp? How do we foster that? How do we try to get up to speed?
I mean, one, maybe create a new specialized master of public policy in digital society. No, but
legit plug.
I think inviting people to think out loud and in the open together is a powerful way to build capacity. These are no one person, no one department, no one order of government. So, we were chatting before the live stream just about having opportunities to think out loud and on your feet and participate in conversations. That's powerful. I think that's one way. And maybe it ends up starting with those conversations. I mean, earlier I had a catch-up session with my public policy mentor, and she said, you know what? There are no slam dunks left. And I had to go write it down in like my journal. And she's like, this is the other problem right now with policy, is like, there just aren't slam dunks. So everything, she's like, they've been slammed, which is really funny for her to say because she's in her 70s. Mm-hmm. But, yes, recognizing the complexity is there, but I hate reading op-eds that are like, and government needs to just like step in. It's like, we are missing it. And or the idea, right, that government, that it's always a penalty, right? And that government, it's not about an empowering environment that like more innovation can happen, right? There's roles for government with payment modernization and open banking that will create new accountabilities in different regimes, but it's not about, again, penalizing companies just because they're of a certain size.
Well, and Stro, I mean, I know you have a point, but I want to throw you a curveball, Stro, to tag onto it.
Yeah.
You had the privilege of being part of the city TV culture at the tail end of the Moses Znaimer era. And I'd love to hear you sort of describe that a bit. But then what I want you to do is imagine what government would be like if it had that same kind of playful culture.
Right. So it was a wonderful place. Like, I chose to, I had kind of a carte blanche to go and try to go for my placement anywhere I wanted to go. And at that time, this was the late 90s. It was still a family-run business, and you know, Moses had sold the business off, but he was still executive producer. But there was a philosophy behind it being the environment, like we talked about, where it kind of mimics what's going on with reality TV now and internet shows or whatever. There's a freedom, and it didn't matter how diverse, how out there you were, as long as the product went to air and it was genuine. I think that was the kind of the thing behind it, right? And it was a wonderful place to come up in broadcasting, and a place to work. And I still have you know, friends that I made there long after, because they're just good people. And then corporate got in, right? I went through the transition. I actually ended up landing on the Rogers side, because there was the whole CRTC where you couldn't own too much news like it mattered, because, you know, working in the newsroom, all the, like 98%, if it didn't bleed, it was sold news. You know, like, that's how it works, right? Like, it's pitched. All of it is PR. Like, every story there, it's being pitched unless somebody got shot or stabbed or there's a fire. Like,
it would have to be a big fire, though. Let's be realistic.
Yeah. At least 2-3 alarms or something, right? Or if there's, you know, it's sad. I fucking hated working in the newsroom, even though I love the people and I love the building, because there was also Much, and there's also Bravo, and there's Space and all these things. And then I ended up in the newsroom, right? Which was a whole, and I'm like, fuck, I hated the newsroom. Fucking news sucks.
Yeah.
Right? So, you know, going through that journey was very, very interesting. And then I lost my train of thought. What was the second part of the question?
Well, what can you imagine taking that culture, taking that attitude? What would government be like if it was run by Moses Naiman?
I don't know. It would be.
I mean, don't get me wrong. There'd be a lot of sexual assault lawsuits
exactly.
and issues,
be all that.
right? But lots of scandals.
Moses, I don't think. Yeah, it would be exactly what the government is like. Okay, so but what he allowed people to create, right? So if government was only there to set the policy, right, and to make it like your community gets to do what it needs to do to be well. So just going back to Vasiliki's point of the tickle trunk. It's like we're trying to defuse a bomb with what's in a tickle trunk. We don't have the right tools, right? Because it's
a MacGruber episode.
Right? Give us the right tools, and that means communities get what they need. So what the government, what the Moses, what the executive producer, the policymakers need to do is give us the direction, the toolkit, the philosophy behind that, right? Yeah. And so as complex as it is, you don't have to do it with one shot. You do it with the idea that, hey, let's make this sustainable, fair, right? Let's put human rights ahead of property rights, and then work on the wealth and do that by giving communities what they need.
So I agree with you 100%. But allow me to play a little bit of devil's advocacy and push back on both of you in terms of stuff that you've said. Yeah. What if, and here, so Vass and I have been joking lately that we need more LARPing in politics, right? We need more like, live action role playing where you don't just talk about what you believe, you just talk about crazy ideas to just get them out there. So that's what I'm about to do, even though this sounds like something I would totally believe in. What if the government of Canada went to the digital giants and said, we're in a crisis. There's a pandemic. People are at home. We are going to levy you a one-time $1 billion each, and maybe that's too low, but a one-time $1 billion fee each, and the entirety of that money is going to go to rural and remote broadband. Because it's a crisis here in Canada. The digital divide's getting longer. We don't have time to wait. This is just going to be a one-time, thank you very much charge. You can fight us if you want, or you could recognize that this is win-win because all those people are going to sign up for Facebook. And all those people are going to use Google as a search. So really, this is just an emergency, an intervention, a crisis. We're calling you to step up, but we're not asking you. We're just informing you and letting you know that we're going to do it. Go ahead and watch me, right? Go ahead and stop me. Thoughts?
Yeah, that doesn't even seem like far-fetched. Like, that's exactly what needs to happen. What needs to happen is the government needs to get some fortitude and be like, we're actually bigger than like, the reason companies can exist is because we became a country one way or another at some point. We're supposed to have some authority here, right? And they need to step up and do it for the people that they're supposed to represent, because no one interest group should be bigger than the wealth of all of us. So yeah, $1 billion, that's nothing.
Yeah, I agree. I was shooting low.
Right? Like I was thinking you're gonna go somewhere further out, like in this multiverse that we're likely a part of. And excuse me, because I just watched The Farthest. It was about this Voyager's. How it's out there out of our solar system. So I'm thinking, and this NASA scientists are like, I bet you, right? I believe the NASA scientists said somebody's having this exact same conversation somewhere else right now. Yes. Like on another solar system. And I'm like, what if the government of Canada is actually like, some aliens running, or they are run by Facebook? I don't know. But
to your point, I think that these policy discussions are happening. Right? I think for them to become plausible, for them to become realistic, they have to happen in many places simultaneously, i.e. behind closed doors in government and out in the public. So that government looks in the public and says, well, they're talking about taxing the big giants. I guess it's viable.
I mean, I think we don't appreciate that many jurisdictions acting in concert fucks with the companies, right? We do a lot of sequential stuff. We have a lot of wait and see in Canada. It would be much savvier, in the way that I think people are trying to now coordinate in response to the kind of Facebook Australia stuff. And I shouldn't say fucks with companies. I just mean challenges them more to respond. Mm-hmm. To that LARPing question, I think the companies could easily also, first of all, I'm surprised a large technology company hasn't invested in broadband for Canada because of the profound halo effect and because of the, opportunity. Does that opportunity outweigh the cost? It doesn't, but does the halo effect? Yeah, probably. Mm-hmm. Two, I would think about licensing those companies if we want to create a new particular category and literally define them by how tech is defined. We're very comfortable with this. Again, point to municipalities. Let's learn from municipalities that have been licensing Airbnb, licensing Uber. I mean, It seems we treat it as something small because it's so hyper localized, but municipalities have been through some shit with tech. Mm-hmm. And we would be remiss to take this federal view and then ignore some of those key lessons. So I would like to see maybe something more akin to a licensing regime that's permissive, but captures things. Also, we have a sales tax. We have HST that we're not properly enforcing in jurisdictions where we're charging it to digital companies. Mm-hmm. That makes me nervous, right? That gives me anxiety. And, if we can't get that right, how are we going to get the digital sales tax right? Because I don't think we get that many opportunities, actually. I think it's a huge risk in terms of the role of the state in our lives, the state's ability to rein in big tech. And if we, again, quote RuPaul, don't fuck it up. I'm swearing a lot today, but if we F it up, which I think we can say on Twitch, I don't know, you tell me, do you have rules on your show?
So, no, it's interesting you say that because one of our loyal subscribers, BK from St. Albert's? From north of Edmonton in Alberta. How you doing, BK? Always a pleasure you're here. He was a little thrown off by our swearing, but I want you guys to swear. Swearing is welcome. Because it's what you can't do on the CBC. So therefore, it is what you are welcome to do here.
No, now, I'll do a better job. That's the last thing I'll say because I was rambling a bit. New licensing, define the companies, acknowledge why they didn't fit into categories we had before, and kind of make it a less opaque regulatory environment instead of just saying, here's a new tax.
Now, I do have to quickly say, you realize that if you didn't say you were rambling, nobody would know. Because everything you're saying is coherent and intelligent and makes sense and sounds like you've been working on this forever.
Oh, no. Great.
So don't get me wrong. From a comedy perspective, it's gold. You've got great timing,
Okay.
but no one knows you're rambling. But I want to double down on your licensing point, because I also think that licensing is a very low-hanging fruit that speaks to this regulatory capacity we want. But I first want to say that I think the reason that the big tech giants haven't waded into connectivity and broadband is because they tried and failed. Like they had their master plans, right? Google, I think, had the balloons. Facebook had these solar drones. So they both were intending to solve connectivity. Elon Musk, the arch villain, is probably beating them to it. So I think as they figure that out and come back, we're gonna hear something in that file. But I've for a while been championing the idea that every organization, so individuals are exempt, but every organization in Canada that uses an algorithm for any purpose must get a license. That license does not restrict what they can do with the algorithm insofar as the Canadian laws restrict what they can do with it. But it then allows us to know who in the country is using algorithms and what are they doing with it. And I would suggest that that entire registry should be transparent as a research tool and an educational tool, so that as Canadians, we could look at all the other Canadians and go, hey, what's everybody doing with their algorithms? Which then allows us to both co-develop, because people can start connecting with each other and going, hey, yeah, I'm using that method. Is it working for you? Yeah, it's working for me. But more importantly, the government, to your point, Vass, builds that capacity and builds that ability to, to understand this stuff. Stro?
Yeah, so, that's great. That's absolutely everybody. But I think everything is becoming an algorithm. And I think those algorithms are important because it sells you stuff, right? It comes back down to where's the money really go? And why is there such a big pool of it held by so few in the communities, right? Like this is what we're going back to defunding big, not just police, but defunding all the big organizations that have this iron grip on the wellness of the communities and the individuals in them, right? So it really is about stepping up as the government needs to step up and taxing better and spreading the wealth better, because there's more than enough money and wealth in the world to sustain us.
So,
but the tax, sorry to interrupt because
go ahead.
You're the moderator. Back to legitimization. Again, paying a tax, great, you capture some revenue. Tax is not necessarily accountability, right? The companies could still do all of the things we hate and resent and have had trouble holding them to account for. So it has to be tax and we shouldn't be satisfied with just a tax. And really, if we had other sources of economic growth, I'd wonder if we'd be so hot on the digital tax train.
So I agree 100%. And I wonder if the tax is the first part of tax and, because you need the actual revenue to develop the regulatory capacity. But I'm going to throw out another LARP ball rather than curveball, another LARP pitch. And this is something that came up in the Salon, the Metaviews episode we did last week when we first explored this paper. Because, what I was hearing, Stro, in your remarks is, the whole ethic of, tax the rich to feed the poor, right? That a society should have a progressive tax rate so that people who make more money pay more taxes, right? And people who have less money maybe don't pay any taxes at all. They get social benefits, right? That's kind of the liberal welfare state. So I've been wondering, could we apply that to the attention economy? In that the attention economy, right? If you guys remember the whole long tail idea, where only a small amount of people on the platform, whether YouTube, whether Twitch, whether Twitter, get all the attention, get all the tweets, get all the followers. And everybody else is in that long tail where even if you've got 10,000 followers, you're not really that different to someone who has 10 followers compared to the people who have 10 million, right? Or even more. So what if there was a tax on influencers, right? What if we recognize that in addition to digital media companies that are, becoming super rich, that there are now influencers in the attention economy who are becoming wealthy, literally wealthy, right? Like I think of Logan Paul and Jake Paul as like, you know, two examples of the legacy of the Kardashians, right? The next generation of keeping up with the Kardashians. Should we be taxing them for the mere fact that they're successful at getting attention? And I think that this very much reinforces Vass's point of, does taxation actually foster accountability? If we tax these influencers, would we then alter their behavior and culture, which many people find, you know, destructive, toxic? Again, I'm floating the idea to get your reaction.
Are you saying tax on top of the tax they should already pay for their income? Like,
Yeah, absolutely. An additional tax. And think of it like a tax on smoking, right? That we tax cigarettes because there's a negative health effect. We should tax influencers because there's a negative health effect.
What if it's a positive influence? Do you give them a kick, then more money? Like, right? What if they're, because I think, and again, it's got to come down to why is money a thing, right? Like, and I know it's the meta view, right? But it is. Like, can we please like start making society work so that it benefits the people and the environment, and you know, so that the ecology works, right? So I think you got to go higher up for that. You got to go meta for that, because the individuals, I disagree with the bureaucracy of that would take and the cost of taxing the individuals, where really, if they're on Facebook or Twitter, they should be paying, or on Instagram, whatever, right? Whatever it is, social media is. That
jump right in there,
umbrella should do it. Should pay the tax.
I mean, there are different ways you could tax, right? There are lots of ways where we've overregulated certain professions that you could look to for inspiration with influencers, and, you know, say that if you have a certain amount of ads, if you want to place ads, maybe that's the threshold of a certain amount, then you have to pay this annual fee, and you agree to some kind of, I don't know if it's a code of conduct. I mean, in the influencer economy, I think Canada's probably best known for exporting like far right thinkers. So I don't know if that's good or bad for us in the taxation space. You can also think of other places that cascades, right? So, you know, at some point, I think tax authorities will become more interested in platforms like Substack, and whether and how people are reporting that income, because they don't have a line of sight. And some people's knee-jerk reactions will be what we hear already, right? Substack should just charge income tax, and like it should charge HST, and it should remit for people. And we switch. There's a pendulum, you know, of the individual being responsible for the tax, which is what I think, and, you know, companies, because they have a particular line of sight, wanting to do that. But, you know, ultimately, I do think it's a problem that we have much more stringent rules for charities in this country than we do for large technology companies.
Yeah.
When you think of how, you know, the scrutiny that we offer those, you know, very small, very well-intentioned entities, and then how lawless we've let large technology become, which is a fascinating play.
And to your point, it's not just charities, right? I mean, I learned this long ago, that the easiest way to do a social organization is to structure it as a for-profit corporation. You don't have to actually make money. But from a bureaucratic overhead perspective, you know, it's the path of least resistance, right? It's and like, for example, cooperatives, the bureaucratic overhead to run a cooperative is so discouraging to cooperatives. Like, it just in and of itself says, no, you don't want to do a cooperative unless you have bureaucratic tendencies. Now, don't get me wrong, there's software that is starting to at least alleviate that or make that a little easier. But I think you raise a very important point around the notion of regulatory overhead and whether it becomes a burden, especially for smaller organizations, when it's intended to hold those large organizations accountable, to hold large power, period, accountable. But I'm glad you brought up the notion of companies doing the remit. Because so I'm obviously going through a big Twitch obsession, and I'm studying Twitch, and I'm
Yeah.
thinking about Twitch, and I'm wrapping my head around Twitch. And what's fascinating, what attracts me to Twitch is more than any other creator platform or media platform, it lends itself to monetization.
Mhm.
All the tools are there for the creator to really encourage their audience to pay and support them. And there's a culture that enables that and facilitates that. But, you know, on a basic level, Amazon's getting 50% or more. So it's remarkable how, you know, the casino always wins. That even though you're encouraged to sort of gamble and try to get attention and hope that you become an influencer and hope that you become, you know, a professional Twitch streamer, fundamentally, whether you win or lose, it's Amazon who gets paid in the end. And the extent to which the culture downplays that and emphasizes the role of the streamer and emphasizes the role of the creator so that all the attention goes to them, even if the lion's share of the money's going to Amazon, speaks to this notion of defund big tech and refund community. Stroke?
You know what? This reminds me very much of communism, right? Like when the reason that was a problem is because there was so much central power, right? Like it's no different. It's in the idea of not the fake idea of the people, but the idea of capital, of freedom. There's no freedom when you have so few entities controlling so much what people need, right? So the question I was going to ask is: Twitch owned by Amazon?
Yes.
Okay.
So if you think about, if we roll this back and look at big tech, right? I mean, you know, this gets to your story about Chum and City, right? The way that the media in Canada were bought up by the telecom companies. So the same thing is happening with big tech, that the way in which Google bought YouTube and YouTube has become a big part of global culture, well, Amazon has Prime Video, and so Twitch is like the farm leagues, right? It's like the minor leagues, both because all the video on Twitch is invaluable data to train Amazon's algorithms, right? They have people streaming video game content as well as all sorts of content, which is so, like, that was why Google bought YouTube, was because they needed that content to train their algorithms. They were fine with YouTube losing money forever, and eventually they found advertising as a way to pay for it. So Amazon also sees advertising as a way to pay for Twitch, but there's actually not a lot of ads on Twitch because Amazon is more interested in the data and using the video from Twitch to help train their machine learning algorithms. So just as the telecoms bought media because they thought they needed content, now big tech is buying big media because they need the data, right? To be training their algorithms, to be improving their algorithms. So that's where Twitch is this interesting cross between a media platform and a technology platform. Because the other part about Twitch that I find interesting compared to all the others is it's programmable. Like there's lots of automated channels and there's lots of automated features and automated experiences. So I'm getting off track, but I wanted to convey the idea that we're seeing company towns emerge in which the company controls everything, how you get paid, what you do, who pays you. It's more than just being an intermediary. It's the fully vertically integrated mining town or monopoly town, which echoes your concerns, Stro. So I want to, as we wrap this up, I want to emphasize the refund to community.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think, Vass, your point about, the tax or the accountability so what is the end? What is the carrot? What is the value proposition that is offered to communities as to why they should get behind these kinds of policies? Like, what are we offering with, my obvious being broadband, right? That to, solve the broadband crisis is a no-brainer. But what are some other ideas? What are some other ways that you guys think that community could be refunded if we were to defund or at least start to siphon away from the vast wealth that big tech has constructed?
Well, you have your hand up.
Well, I was just going to say, just to comment on what you're saying, Jesse, about Twitch and Amazon owning it, and how they're just changing the advertising Like, why is the data valuable? Why is the algorithm valuable? Because really it's about selling stuff, right? Like they just want to be able to sell stuff.
Yeah.
And make money selling shit that goes back in the ocean as plastic or whatever. Like, like it's horrible, right?
Yeah.
So it is totally about, by defunding, we don't mean get rid of them and like make them poor. They're always going to be fine because they, right? Like they're going to be better than fine. It's really about making the communities fine and sharing that wealth so that, you know, like it comes to, for me, it comes back to, we can buy more shit off of Amazon if everybody's got money to do it, right? Everybody's got time to enjoy the things and have quality things as opposed to just more of that, right? So,
which is the whole argument in favor of the middle class.
right.
That by enabling a middle class, that middle class then spends the money that the middle class has that enables more growth and sustainability and prosperity.
Yeah.
Vass?
I mean, part of me is wondering, is my future self ever going to get in trouble for like what I said on your Twitch show, right? But to that future self, I say, you know, look what a good job you did participating in interesting conversations with interesting people. And then two things. Maybe kind of part two of that digital divide where, you know, solving for the devices and like the literacy that people need. But then there's also a kind of reciprocity question with a lot of these platforms because, you know, I think it's back to the pantomime and the illusion. Just because you have a group or a great petition or a job posting or an apartment available for rent, you know, doesn't mean that it's able to be really widely seen by people.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, is advertising credits something that different communities need to have? I'm not sure. I don't actually think so, but it's kind of like, what should these companies be literally giving or writing off in their bottom line that isn't a shiny thing that's over here? Like a lot of the corporate social responsibility with tech is either business development or, you know, we're all having this conversation over here and the company wants to talk to you about this other issue. For example, Airbnb. People want to talk about housing affordability and rental rates. And Airbnb likes to be like, a lot of seniors are hosts. It's like, that's great. Can you imagine having a conversation, two people? Hey, I'm really concerned about rent in my city and the vacancy rate. And then the other person is like, thank you. A lot of women are hosts. It's like, great. I'm really concerned about, I can't find an apartment. And it's like, some of our hosts are artists. It's like,
yeah,
great. Like, that's all so cool, but it's not the main conversation.
But I think, to go back to something Stroh said earlier, it does speak to a kind of robotic culture that both permeates corporate communications, but also individuals. Like, you know, there are a lot of young men who have similar, like, dude, bro, like they sound like corporate communications because they're that stiff and they're that unresponsive and they're that robotic. So I don't want to just slag corporations. I think there are some humans who are also susceptible to such roboticism. But I actually like your point about ad credits and the way I would legitimize it, for lack of a better word, or unpack it so that in the future, you know, we are able to defend ourselves for this idea that we are birthing. Maybe part of the problem is the framing itself. Like I have always said, Facebook should not be allowed to describe Facebook because Facebook doesn't have the critical distance. Like those people aren't my friends. They're my Facebook contacts. Right. And I think, you know, if I would love I don't want to see language police, but I would love to see, like, you know, the librarian in chief who also gets to hang out with the poet laureate and they get to issue language alerts every once in a while, just reminding people how language works. Because what if I were to take your suggestion and I were to roll it back into the attention economy?
Yes.
Right? That we live in an attention economy and access to that attention should be democratized. So that if you want to start a small business in your home, you should have the right to get attention and have people know you do it. If you want to create a YouTube channel or if you want to create a beer hockey league podcast, you should then be able to get attention for it and get promotional credits so that you can promote your product, promote your content, promote your political idea to the people that you want it to reach to, because that's what Facebook and Google have created as attention marketplaces that many people regard as public spaces. So what if we were to regulate not just the advertising, but the algorithmic visibility, right? What Facebook calls boosts, right? And what other platforms call boosts, so that, yes, as credits, everyone got them. The same way that as a rural homeowner, I get a garbage pass every year, where every year I can go to the local dump and bring the stuff that the truck won't pick up. And as a taxpayer, I get one pass a year. If I go twice, I got to pay.
Yeah.
So everyone gets a certain amount of ad credits. Everyone gets a certain amount of boost credits or attention credits, so that they too can promote their cause, their issue, their business. It's up to them, right? That democratizes and makes it fair. So I agree. I think that's a fantastic example of something that would be easy and would not create bureaucracy, but still helps to refund community.
Yeah.
Stro, did you want to jump in there?
I'm just trying to get, that's a wonderful idea. Like, again, I think it's about everybody having a level playing field, right? So it's not skewed. But how would you do that? Like, is it, if you sign on, like, because maybe it would be difficult to do that, right? Like, how do you, without, I guess you have to register, right? Like, when you register, you get a certain amount of credits, and for
also, not everyone would redeem them. So it's like not even that, it's not as expensive for the company in terms of not every user is going to redeem their $10, $20 credit. You could also set thresholds, like you have to be a member for X amount of time, after which you receive this credit. So there could be, some other kind of threshold that people have to cross in order to access it.
But I think, again, to risk hating what I'm about to say in my future, but saying it anyway because we're LARPing, the one piece we haven't really talked about today that comes up a lot, and I'm flagging it because it's relevant, but I'm also saying, this is another future salon or future discussion, is how does this connect to literacy? And should literacy be not just a requirement, but a responsibility, right? And the analogy here that I'm going to give another disclaimer. I don't necessarily agree with what I'm about to say, but this is something that I've seen come up in this discussion for decades, literally. The idea of having a license to use the internet, right? That if you want a driver's license in society, you have to take an exam. Ideally, you're incentivized to take driver training. You have to get an insurance policy so that if you do something bad to other people, it's covered. Is it ludicrous to suggest that maybe the internet should have certain tiers that are accessible, that are supported, that, we make like training and literacy training as accessible and free as possible, but nonetheless require people that if you want to stream on Twitch, you need to pass a test that shows what the Canadian Charter is and what it means, or that you have basic understanding of tort law and what tort law is and why you can't libel and slander. I'm getting ridiculous, but to what extent, should a society mandate such responsibilities rather than what we've been doing, which is just kind of trust that people will figure it out on their own, or bake it into some terms of service that no one reads or understands. Although, again, I will give credit to Twitch. Twitch goes out of their way to communicate their terms of service to their users because they are so punitive in enforcing it that they want people to fully understand it because they are brutal in terms of how they enforce it.
I think you're exactly right. That's exactly what it comes down to. It's having a common understanding of what's right, what's wrong, what works, and how it works. That the literacy. We shouldn't be having kids after grade 8 or even grade school not understand this stuff. It goes back to this is the way we needed to make everybody be able to read and write. This is the way the world is now. It is part of reading and writing to understand how media works and who's selling you what, and how to behave online, and who's accountable and what you're accountable for. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And just on the note of you always should regret things you've said before, because that's how you grow as a person, right? Like you bounce.
Right. When I'm gonna be calling you when I'm under fire years from now for my rant.
Blame it on me. Blame it on. It's all
I'll be like,
my
it's this
fault.
guy, Stro One. Call him.
Fine.
You know, I think there's a literacy piece, and Jesse, you and I have talked about this. I think the burden on the individual is still a little bit too high, right? So if there's something public that benefits the public that we should be investing in more formally to signal a particular digital literacy, maybe credentializing some of that knowledge is an interesting pathway to consider, but it doesn't change the fact that we under-regulate our online lives so much, right? For some reason, I wanted to give an example with like cigarettes or cars. It's not a great example. Yeah, I don't have a great analogy. Now we're joking about getting in trouble in the future. It's just like, I don't want to give an example that doesn't actually make any sense. But I think we should focus on intervening to improve material and structures and business structures online in concert with, you know, supporting people as they experience the internet and their lives. I mean, the question is, in the future, where's you said the attention economy? Well, where's the class action lawsuit going to be for, you know, someone who lost their adolescence because they were on Twitch for 7 years? Okay, is that the individual? Is it the pure individual burden? Is it family? Is it the company that did such a good job capturing this person's attention that they didn't make other friends, didn't eat healthy, you know, didn't discover themselves? Like, I think we're going to start to see these kinds of questions and resentment around attention allocation and time that we've right now normalized. And again, just sort of blow off on individuals that that's someone's choice, or they just love scrolling on Instagram. And it's like, actually, you know, with the data too, like, is there not danger zones that we're in? Or, you know, a bartender cannot overserve me, though I'd love to see a bartender sometime soon, you know what I mean? But like, they can't overserve me. But like, again, I have my own Instagram. My husband lets me go on his now and then. And, you know, who's accountable when I cannot stop scrolling? Like, that's why I don't have it, because I have the kind of personality that will be catatonic and shopping online.
So
like, actually,
definitely don't go near TikTok then, because, you know, TikTok has perfected those dopamine hits. Yeah. And I actually do think what you're describing, the cigarette analogy, is apt, because we have to remember that doctors recommended cigarettes. And it's not that doctors were more corrupt then than they are now. It's that the science then didn't understand it, or that the cigarette companies suppressed that science, so the rest of society didn't know. And I think, to your point, we're going to see the same analogy with mental health, that our understanding of mental health is maturing. I think we're going to reach a point in which we can look back and look at the way in which the dopamine hits and the design of social media very much had huge and profound negative mental health care. We might even call it a pandemic, right? It might get to that level. And I there may not be class action lawsuits, because Facebook will be the judiciary at that point. But I do think that there's going to be a similar day of reckoning where we sort of wonder, you know, how did this happen and why, and how come we didn't see it at the time? Yeah. But in closing us off, I want to kind of bring it back to what I feel are two sides of the same coin, which is, on the one hand, we're trying to normalize the concept of regulation. Because it's as if we spent an entire generation treating regulation as worse than tabernacle in terms of a swear word, and no one would say it, and no one wanted to hear it, and we just put our heads in the sand, and government suffered as a result. Government's ability to regulate suffered as a result, and the public's ability to use regulation to serve community, to empower community, to fight back against the concentration of power, that was a huge mistake. Thankfully, we're figuring that out, and we're getting back to regulation. We're getting there. And then I think the other piece of the same side is the capacity to regulate.
Yeah.
So that now that we're like, okay, regulation's not a bad word, now we got to pack that tickle trunk. And we got to make sure that the things we put into that tickle trunk allow us to deal with the crises and challenges that we're facing moving forward. And that's not going to happen quickly, even though we want it to happen quickly. But both of those kind of give me courage. Stro, were you trying to jump in?
Yeah, just, we need a toolbox, not a tickle trunk to deal with it.
Or both, because I think costumes are part of this.
But it does come down to why is regulation a bad thing? Like, we have laws for a reason. It's to make everybody well, right? Like, it's to make society well so that we know how to navigate. That's why the holy books are there. That's why laws are there. It's to have a community heading somewhere that's safe. Like, so we're protecting our species. That includes protecting our environment. That includes all these things that are becoming a part of the conversation. That's why the conversations are so important, to spread the understanding, right? It has to come from somewhere. So there's just really one law: is my freedom ends where your nose begins, right? So that we can coexist in a benevolent and prosperous way. And that's why we need to defund the police, defund big data, and that doesn't mean abolish. That means spread the wealth, right? And again, I know I'm not as versed on these topics. I'm going meta with it all because I'm just learning about it, right? Like, and thinking about it because of the conversations. But definitely, it's the same. It's the principles that we need from our governments or whoever the policymakers are, if it's Facebook or whoever. But somebody needs to be accountable for how this world and the humans and the beings in it get along.
Bass, do you want to take us out? Any last words or thoughts?
I guess I'm for the tickle trunk. I'm just kidding. I mean, new tools, right? Let's rummage around and be creative together. And it's okay for governments to be vulnerable and say that they're not sure, or that they don't have the tool that they need. I think it's much more dangerous to pretend that we are ready to go and we're going to just be imposing these taxes. That's the kind of deception that I think technology companies have been serving us to. That's me.
Well said. Well said. Anyway, this has been, I feel, a very enjoyable conversation. A big shout out to BK, who's stuck it out throughout the show. I mean, BK's main point, which I've brought up a few times, is broadband, as a real key economic and cultural driver of the country. We do these salons every Tuesday, roughly about this time, although I'm sometimes tempted to move them to the morning, if only because I need naps in the afternoon. I'm an old man. Metaviews has shows here daily, sort of. Sometimes I'm playing around with the format a little bit. And we're going to end the stream shortly, and then I suspect re-enable it sometime soon, because we got our second goat birth of the week. And who can resist little kid goat? So thanks, Vasiliki. Thanks, Greg. It was both great. I hope to see you guys soon. And thanks again, everybody.
Nice to chat. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And
yeah.